Welcome to Radiologists, a podcast by University Medical Imaging Toronto, where we discuss the most interesting topics through the lens of Canada's largest medical imaging department. I'm your host, Satish Krishna. Time travel. Throughout human history, time travel is a concept which has sparked human imagination, which has sparked our fancy. Numerous stories and numerous movies have attempted to capture the magic of time travel. Of course, one of those iconic movies is Back to the Future. The hero of the movie was, of course, Marty McFly. However, no one can forget the charismatic Doc Brown. Doc Brown was a genius, a visionary, an innovator, an inventor, and he invented the flux capacitor, which took us on the DeLorean on this magical journey. Today, with us, we have our own beloved inventor, Dr. Kieran Murphy, who's not just a radiologist, but an innovator. In fact, he was awarded the Society of Interventional Radiology Innovator of the Year Award in 2015. Kieran, it's great to have you here.
You're very kind. Thank you.
From what I understand, you have more than 80 patents.
Yeah.
You have more than 6 medical companies spanning 2 or 3 continents. You have so many devices which are being used thousands of times throughout. When did it begin? What was your first invention? And thinking back, what is the first moment you thought that, now I need to be an inventor?
I think it was the chip cheese sandwich. When I was a kid, I was always making crazy sandwiches at home. I would make the most unusual combinations of things, like chips and cheese and toast and mayonnaise and mustard. You know,
it's literally chips, cheese sandwich.
It's an epic sandwich. So I was always making, and this has continued, and my poor children are often traumatized by my cooking because sometimes it just doesn't work. Like the pink omelet was a low point because salsa is good.
The pink omelet?
Yeah, salsa is good and omelets are good. So I thought I'd put the salsa in the omelet, but it came out pink, and a pink omelet's revolting.
Isn't that huevos rancheros or something?
But this was like vomit pink. It looked like a pink frisbee. It was awful. So yeah, so there's been all sorts of things that have gone on over the years, not always successful.
And all your patents and your companies, when I'm looking into it, they are so diverse. It's not just devices, but then I find that you have a medical education company which is completely online and has nothing to do with hardware at all. So I see that you have your fingers everywhere. And that's incredibly amazing that you've been able to achieve innovation in almost every sphere we can think of. Personally, which ones are you most proud of? And which ones do you think were the most challenging to actually bring about?
The ones that are used the most are probably the best contribution to medicine, and those are the Murphy needles that are used.
The Murphy needles, named after you.
Yeah, yeah. I trademarked my name so nobody could take it because people lose control of their name. Now, the more your idea aligns with pre-existing belief systems, the easier it is to get the idea adopted. And the more it is distant from what we believe, then the longer it takes. So my ozone device for shrinking herniated discs has been 19 years' work because it is so counterintuitive that a gas dissolves the nucleus pulposus. In our recent European prospective randomized trial against open surgery, 71% of people avoided surgery.
Wow, just by using the
O3 in the disc. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's so simple, but it makes no sense. So you work out the mechanism of action, and you simplify the technique, and you make it scalable and teachable, and you protect it with IP, and then you build a team to help you commercialize that. The inventor is the best person to do most of that. And physicians make the best inventors. 90% of the widely used medical devices are developed by busy clinicians, not PhDs in research silos.
So you treat patients, but then you're back in your lab creating stuff as well. Is your approach to the two different? Is there like a clinician mode which you have to switch on, in which you have to take care of patients, and then the other innovator mode? Because when treating clinicians, when treating patients, you've got to be 99% right. But while inventing stuff, you can do 99% things wrong. And all you need to do just be is 1% right. Is there a different part of you which kicks in? Is there a different approach or a different mode?
I don't think so. I think it's a continuum. We have a duty to our patients to be kind. I'm a huge fan of the placebo effect. I'm a huge fan of a good handshake. I get a lot of my patients coffee after their procedures because they've been fasting. And,
Wow. That's a lot of coffees
it is.
to a carrier.
Yeah, the lady at Second Cup knows me very well. She's great. But, we need to do those kind of things, and it helps patients because they believe that you are engaged in getting them well. I see about 900 patients here. I treat about 600. So I do this like every day. Now, the inventor stuff, that's much easier. And that's, have you ever been in a situation where somebody said something and you made the perfect response at the moment, at the time? And that moment and your delivery of that rebuttal, that's exactly what it feels like to invent something. And it happens that quickly. And then you have to explain it. But the moment of insight is really fleeting and brief. And one thing that people underestimate is the importance of serendipity in all this.
Mm.
Often you'll stumble on something, and a lot of people won't notice its significance, and they keep moving on. But the well-trained mind, the pluripotential mind, will spot it and realize the irregularity, the anomaly, and that there's something significant in that. A friend of mine won a Nobel Prize for discovering something when he was a PhD. Initially, he thought it was an error and that he'd made a mistake. But he went back and mined that for another 10, 15 years. And that's why he received that award, because he noticed the inconsistency. It's like finding the needle in the haystack, right? And so I think that is really key to actually understand why something didn't work. When you design the devices, it's called FMECA, failure mode and effect analysis. You need to understand why something fails. And then when you make the device, you need to think of all the permutations of human errors that could occur with using that device to prevent patients being hurt. If you do something really unusual, like I treat women with back pain with the thing called Tarlov cysts. I developed the technique. It's 2 needles into a cyst, one deep, one superficial. You aspirate fluid, create an air fluid level in the dural ectasia, and then I put in fibrin glue. It's really simple. I've treated over 1,000 people with that. But when you're doing something unusual like that, you have to be so careful that you're not wrong. Maybe you're eccentric. Maybe you've got yourself into a bad train of thought, that you're actually hurting people, and you've persuaded yourself you're doing something right, but in fact you're wrong. Egis Monitz, who developed angiography, also developed the frontal lobotomy. In fact, he got the Nobel Prize for the frontal lobotomy. He didn't intend to hurt people, but he did the wrong thing. So when you do something unusual, you have to be so much more careful that it is the right thing to do.
I guess that's where the balance comes in, because as an inventor, innovator, you're taking risks, you're thinking of very different ways of solving a problem. But then you have the clinician part of you. And then you realize that you've got to be incredibly careful, because now you're going to use those inventions on real patients, and you can't afford any failures there. And I think that balance is.
And your implant will be in them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
My bone cements, people will die with that in their vertebra, right? They don't care about the procedure. That's for us. They care about the implant. How will that implant be treated? Is it self? Is it non-self? Is it allergenic, hypoallergenic? Are they male? Are they female? Because there's a difference in allergenicity. Women are more allergic to things than men. Women have 80% of our severe contrast reactions, for example. That was one of my fund papers 2 years ago. And, so we need to think of all those elements, and that's all part of your responsibility.
Wow. I think you summarized it really well, because some people stumble into something really brilliant, then they hurriedly pick themselves up and walk right.
So you know that quote, right?
Yeah.
Churchill, right?
It was Winston Churchill. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That was a great quote. But question is, some of these inventions, some of these attempts don't really work out.
That's right.
No matter how hard you try.
Yes.
Has there been like a story in which you were persistently trying something and it either did not work out, or you persistently tried and then finally after many years it did work out? And what's the line there? How long do you need to keep it going?
Difficult. It's Young's modulus of elasticity, that a metal has a bending point beyond which you can't get back, right? You got that line, you got the upstroke of increasing pressure, then it begins to bend.
Yeah.
Every invention is like that Young's modulus. Now, Young was a doctor, by the way. He was an expert in TB. He was president of the Royal Society. He translated the Rosetta Stone. He figured out the accommodation pathway in the eye. And he was a true genius. But this modulus of elasticity is the same with any moment when you try and invent something. There will be a point where you say, I have to walk away from this. And it's all about timing. It's beyond your control. With Medlantis, my educational platform, we shut that down 3 months before COVID because nobody wanted to invest in it. Nobody wanted to maintain it. And I was supporting it personally, financially.
Okay.
And if we'd kept it going another 4 months, we would have been funded because everybody went remote.
Absolutely.
So timing is beyond your control. There's that kind of timing in terms of timing of the external world. There's also timing in terms of your resilience. How long can I sustain this for? I recently met somebody who's got a 26-year timeline for his investments.
26. Oh,
so he looks to do things that will help his children and his grandchildren, which is a very interesting way to approach things. You can't do that in our world, but it is intriguing because there's that kind of timing as well. So this element of timing, it's unfortunately beyond the control of the inventor. There can be a Jungian synchronicity where your idea and timing coincide, and that's perfect.
That is amazing. Because quite often you always think of entrepreneurs that they become rich and that's...
They don't. Most fail, right? And the other stereotype is they're all white young men in Palo Alto. And that's wrong too. Most inventors successful inventors are in their 40s and 50s. They've had previous failures. They may have a little track record, and that makes them more investable in. And then location.
So I understand that you have written a book, which is, let me get this right. It's called The Essence of Invention.
Yeah.
It's not out in the market as yet. And I think that the release date is mid-June, June 18th, 2024.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, it's available both in a Kindle, like on online edition, as well as a hardbound copy for those of you who want to physically have it in hand and reading it.
Yeah.
And I think that the tagline of the book says, you capture the mind of the inventor, their turmoil, their persistence, the rejection by their peers, and how a small percentage are eventually recognized.
Yeah.
Is this something that you experienced? Is it kind of autobiographical?
No.
To an extent?
Some of it is. I think what happened is we got a puppy, and the puppy was up at 6 o'clock in the morning. So suddenly I had an hour less sleep every morning. So I wrote a book because I had like between 6 and 7 in the morning where I had nothing to do. I love the puppy, Alfie. Alfie gets most of the credit for the book. He's in this book is dedicated to Alfie. And so I'd wanted to do this for a while. I'd been accumulating thoughts and notebooks on this concept for a while. And I include inventors of medical devices amongst the broader creative community. It's about 3% of the population who are creative. So it's about 3% of society in every walk of life that create the world the rest of us live in, whether it's your iPad or your jacket or your shoes or your wristwatch. It's this 3%. And we need to grow that number and look after that number and to enable them to be as productive as possible in order to benefit from their creativity. there's no relationship between age and creativity, just as there's no relationship between age and humor. And people who are funny throughout their whole lives. People who are inventive throughout their whole lives. As I mentioned earlier, a small percentage of people tend to be creative, mainly busy physicians. And so I looked at different things that motivated, inhibited, accelerated, arrested people's creativity and ability to manifest their idea. Banting is a great example of this kind of thing. He was very bothered by the approach to managing diabetes when he came back from the First World War. So he comes back from the battlefield where he'd been wounded, nearly lost his arm from gangrene, from shrapnel, comes back to London, Ontario, sees a lecture on this technique for managing diabetes where children were basically starved. And then hears about the pancreas. And within 3 years of that lecture, he gets the Nobel Prize for the discovery of insulin.
Insulin, implanting in
3 years. It's an amazing story. And it's hard to imagine how it happened. But his thoughts around that kind of aligned with the work of other people before him. So his invention has a genealogy of thoughts of other minds that predated his. And most inventions have a genealogy behind them, like a family tree. And somebody then sees, I can take that from there, I can take that from there, and I can do this. And then there's a moment of coalescence of those thoughts and incandescence, and a school is created. And then people come and learn that technique, and they leave and they travel back to where they came from, bringing that knowledge with them. And then they teach more people, and it spreads, kind of like a Fibonacci series, right? And we do that in medicine really, really well. If you think of angiography, it comes from the same kind of moments. It began in Portugal in 1928, in a brief window between when the king stepped down and before the fascist Salazar came into power. There was 8 years of political and artistic and medical incandescence. And a fellow called Igas Monitz developed angiography by coalescing X-ray film and X-ray dye and the direct puncture technique to do angiography. Now, his first 8 patients died when he was doing cerebral angiography, but the 9th, it worked. And then people came to learn, and they spread the idea. But this idea of traveling for the pursuit of knowledge is something you and I have done, and it's a critical part of teaching and sharing ideas and spreading creativity and invention, innovation through medicine.
And all this travel and all these different skill sets, you're able to unite to bring forth so many patents and so many new devices. That said, how do you balance it all? How do you balance life as being a busy interventional radiologist and as being an inventor, innovator? And beyond this, do you even have time for yourself? And what do you do on your time off?
I think the whole concept of balance is a myth. I've never had a balanced existence. I would be really bored if I did. And most of the creative people that I know in whatever walk of life are the same, right? We're persistently imbalanced. But if you think of a modern fighter jet, it is not something that can be flown by a human, but only by the integration of multiple subsystems to make that machine fly in level flight, right? And we're like that. There's nothing wrong with that. There's time to be balanced when we're dead, and we have to do something worthwhile and useful before then. I think the most important thing is to say yes. Most of the good things that I've done have come from saying yes to something I didn't want to do. And then you go, shit, why did I say yes? Why did I say yes? I should just have said no. And then you lie awake at 2 a.m. trying to figure out, how am I going to fix this? What am I going to do? How am I going to get to that vessel? You know, there was one occasion where I navigated through the pterygoid plexus into the brain to close the dural levi fistula of the lateral cavernous sinus. Nobody goes through the pterygoid plexus because it's not possible. It's a swamp of little veins. But, you know, you figure it out and you make a plan and you come up with the access. And then there's a moment in every procedure where the procedure is doable and safe and landed. And that isn't the end of the procedure. It just means, yes, this is going to be safe. And some days you need your plan A, your plan B, a plan C, and a plan D. And I've been down to my plan D a couple of times.
Mm.
But those are the ones that you really feel satisfied about. Um, there's also the flow state that occurs during procedures that people don't talk about. People talk about flow in cycling or skiing or other things, but during procedures, we achieve the same state of unification of all our disparate elements: our mind, our education, our control of the angio table, the control of the patient running the room, and the procedure. And that's a very Zen, philosophically rewarding state to achieve of self-mastery. And these things do occur in medicine. We don't really talk about them very much.
Personally, when have you gotten your eureka moments? Is it, you know, late at night, early in the morning, or randomly when talking to people in the middle of a procedure? When do you get your
Yeah,
brilliant? Because you mentioned that they can be very, very fleeting in a very quick time span.
yeah. I cherish the mornings. That's when we're at our best. I don't use my phone as an alarm. I don't have a smartwatch. I don't want one. I want to manage the signal to noise ratio in my head. I'm careful about what I read before I go to sleep. Last night I was reading Markings by Dag Hammarskjöld, which is a wonderful book, the first, General Secretary of the United Nations. Um, so we have to think carefully about that signal to noise ratio in our brain to make sure that we're people of high signal, low noise. And it's not always possible to do it. But the mornings I find are the best time to be creative. And then if I do write something in the morning, I print it at work and I edit it in the evening.
Hmm. That is brilliant. So yeah, I guess that's another good reason for people to wake up early in the morning. I've tried that. Try waking without an alarm. Yeah, it never works for me.
You need a puppy. What you need is a puppy.
True that.
It's beyond your control. The puppy's getting up.
I also hear that you're an amazing race car driver and you drive across multiple continents.
So
Does that help you into a flow state as well? And
yeah,
how about that?
so I love to race cars. I've always loved to race cars, and I've been doing it for about 15 years. I began in the U.S. I joined a team of ex-Marines and raced around Washington with them. They were crazy guys. With a guy called Meathead Motor Racing, and so there's another life where I do that.
Wow.
But so I race on great circuits in the U.S. and Canada, and we have a great culture of motor racing. There, most of the time, I'm just a race car driver. It's all about time, not speed.
Hmm.
And to do that, you need to focus, and you need to not think. The less I think in a race car, the faster I go.
Mhm.
Whereas everything we do here is about thinking. And so you have to dispose of your natural asset
Hmm.
and adopt a different mindset. And it's really healthy. It's very good to be bad at something, because it teaches you how to try harder. And you have to be fit to do this too, because the stresses
Absolutely. And
are
I heard
enormous.
that it's quite a long. How long does a race last?
Some races are 4 hours, some 6 hours, some are only 30 minutes. I did a great 4 hour race at Silverstone last year.
Mhm.
That was brilliant. And because if you've watched Drive to Survive, there are corners there like cops that you have to take flat. And each time you're coming up to that corner, you think, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it, I'm going to go flat. And then your right foot comes up, but it's beyond your control, and it's your brain going, you're going to die, So it's really good fun.
And I also hear that during winter, you race on ice as well.
Well, this is the problem. So the global warming has severely curtailed our ice racing. We formed a committee. The kinsmen of Minden are meeting in the local Tim Hortons to deal with global warming. They're in their hunting gear as we speak. And so the lake's too thin, so we race on the fairground behind the Tim Hortons. And the local fire truck comes out and dumps a couple of 1,000 gallons of water on the fairground and build a track. And then we race Honda Civics. And there'll be about 100 cars up there on the average Saturday or Sunday. Yeah.
That is right out of a James Bond movie.
That's hysterical. It's so
So what you're saying is that you're not just an inventor like Q in James Bond, You're actually James Bond in that fancy invention.
No.
Driving around like a
So
pro.
the Honda Civic I drive is worth about $200 for the ice racing, and that's for the battery. It's a piece of junk. It's 1991. No body panel. It's the same color as the others. But it shows you that there's no connection between the cost of things and the enjoyment of things. And we forget that all the time.
That's profoundly philosophical. Kieran, it was really inspiring talking to you, hearing about where you started and your approach to life. What would your advice be for people very early in their career, not just as radiologists, but anybody who's entering medicine? Because we've had different advice by very different people. We've advice from radiologists who are very clinically oriented. We've had advice from people who are interested in hardcore research. We've had advice from people who are into education. But you, I think, kind of bring it all together. Education, research, innovation, and patient care in one beautiful package. What would your advice be?
I think medicine is a liberal art, and we should enjoy it. We should engage, and we should be socially engaged. We should protect and champion the cause of our patients, and we should speak up more. Physicians have always been people of letters. Traditionally, physicians were engaged in the arts, in poetry, in society in general. And too often we've become small businessmen. And I think it's critical to associate with the right people. You are like your friends, right? If your friends are golfers, or if their horizon is skiing at Collingwood, then you're going to want a Porsche Cayenne or an M5 and a Rolex, and that's going to be your life. Let those people go do that. Don't do that. Stay socially engaged, teach, be around bright, happy minds, whether they're techs or nurses or residents or medical students. These kids and they're all kids that we teach, they're so gifted. Their brains are so well formed. They've biomedical engineering degrees, they've perfect MCATs. I would never get into med school again. And, and they have so much talent that we really need to help them find their creativity and keep them happy about practicing medicine.
That is amazing. I think that for those listeners out there, if you take inspiration from Kieran's journey, if you follow his advice of always being curious, of associating with people who are incredibly smart around you, and also, if possible, waking up early or getting a puppy to do that, then I think that you're on the right path.
Yeah.
Human beings by nature are very curious. We are curious about what happens tomorrow. We dream of how the world will be in the future. We make movies of traveling through time. However, there are some of us who make that future happen today. They are the dreamers, the innovators, and the pioneers. These genius visionaries, they not just dream of the future, they bring the future today. They are, in a way, time travelers. They travel through time, not just by themselves in a DeLorean, but they take the world or the whole world along with them forward in time. So if you are one of them, if you wish to bring future closer to reality, there is no better field for you than radiology, and there's no better place for you than University Medical Imaging, Toronto. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Dr. Kieran Murphy, radiologist and innovator at University Medical Imaging, Toronto, and me, your host, Satish Krishna. You were listening to Radiologists, a podcast by University Medical Imaging, Toronto, the largest medical imaging group in Canada. Produced by Ina Levchuk. Learn more about us at universitymedicalimagingtoronto.ca and follow us on social media at Imaging Toronto.